Welcome to the first video of a series of videos to introduce you into the viable system model. And in the first video, I would like to start with the why. Why is it worth investing time and energy into the model and understand it, how it works and everything, and what makes it so different from other approaches. But I have to start with a little disclaimer, like Stafford Beer, the creator of the model, always also did in his lectures, and he always pointed out that the model is of course not the reality, it's not the truth, it's just a tool, and tools are more or less useful, therefore please do not mistake the model as something that could explain everything. If we would deal with a model that could explain everything, well, then there's the high likelihood that we deal with an ideology, and at least from my point of view, that's something I don't want to deal with. Okay, having said that, let's start with the first question. And the question is, what kind of images do we have of an organization? And in this context, I'm not referring to the famous book of Gareth Morgan, but I would like to take it really quite literal. So what are the visualizations, the drawings, the diagrams that we create when we want to understand how an organization works and how it is organized? And therefore, let's start with the classic org chart, also known as the top-down diagram. And what are actually the ideas behind it? Well, of course, very obvious, we want to group responsibilities and functions within an organization and understand what are the single elements within it. And if you just look purely from this perspective, that is a totally valid need, and such a diagram provides already that kind of a view. Also, additionally, you can be very creative with this kind of org chart, for instance, by adding here a sub-branch to kind of a top management function in order to show that these are here special tasks closely connected to the top management. Also, you can extend such a model by adding also here under the main categories or elements sub-branches again to show a certain structure. So far so good, like I said, very valid, but the problem is, and my critique is, that that kind of a visualization does not help you to understand how the organization actually works. And let's start with a simple example. Let's say there is a top manager and this person has an idea something should be done. And the task is then delegated here to this function within the organization. And since also here this is kind of a management function usually, let's assume that this person says, okay, from an operational point of view, I have now to involve these colleagues because they are the ones who have the knowledge to, solve the task, deliver a certain result. But unfortunately, the people there know that they can only deliver a part of the solution. So they need some support, let's assume, from these guys. All right. Then they ask them, they are also willed to help, but in the moment they are working on other topics, so they have to go back to their management and ask them for permission. Can we do now this task and solve or support these guys because they cannot do it alone, and that has the impact that we cannot do something else, so we need a prioritization. Okay. But this guy now, let's continue now this little journey, says, well, actually, the manager here, my neighbor, is expecting a certain delivery and I have to speak with him about the deprioritization. And of course, in this example, they are able to solve the conflict, so they play it back to the top management. And there you see already a certain circularity that is shown on the one hand, and also, that it's somehow networkish how we indeed in true life work together. So trying to understand how an organization really works, the top-down diagram is not possible from my point of view. And the last point that I would like to make is often the most important stakeholder in the environment and the market is forgotten, and that is the customer. So by using this kind of visualization, you do not really clarify for whom are we actually working, for whom do we want to generate value. And I think this is a real problem. This kind of problem is maybe better tackled in the typical process view. Nothing new. We look at the world as something where we have steps happening in time, actions are taken, and decisions are made. And usually, at least in most of the process visualizations that I know of, you have there something like a customer. So you have a beneficiary in the process at the end point, at the end of the process. So that's the good thing. And also it makes sense to look at the world of what is, in quotes, really happening instead of getting stuck in a structural view and the pure responsibility. But that is then also the disadvantage of the process view, because often in organizations it's maybe easy to design a process, but really to make clear who is now responsible for what. So which persons or group of persons do I need to do something in a certain step, that is often not so clear. That is not a problem, of course, of the idea of the process view itself. That's more a problem that we often create in our organizations by ourselves for different reasons. Another disadvantage of the process view, usually you can look actually at only very limited part of reality. Because imagine you would like to describe a company completely and only with processes. I mean, this is probably theoretically possible, but it will be super hard for the people to understand and digest all these informations. Just imagine there would be a platform and you have an overview really of every process in the company, and one could say, hey, just look there, you find there everything, who is involved, the tools needed, the acceptance criteria, everything that is required to fulfill a certain step, and so on. Yeah, that would be, again, way too much information on the one hand. On the other hand, there's always the problem, of course, that a process itself is not static. Also, processes change, and it's hard to track all these changes for everything that is happening in the company. So processes are usually also, somehow just only a limited view on what is happening in the company. Then another typical visualization style that is going through a certain revival thanks to Spotify is the idea of a matrix organization. And the matrix organization has certain advantages, because on the one hand you have here something like value generating structures, the product teams A, B, C, D in the vertical, and then you ask the question, okay, what kind of skills do I actually need in a vertical so that they are, in the best agile sense, able to solve their own problems with the given resources and the time, and they are as autonomous as possible, they're as independent as possible, and can deliver always value to a customer. That is nice, but since it's again a structural view, again the most important stakeholder is missing. So who's the customer and for whom are we actually working at? And this question is not explicitly incorporated in this kind of visualization. And again, this is for me a real disadvantage. So let's come to maybe the fourth typical way, in quotes typical, to look at an organization, and that is the network view. And the network view itself, again, is probably something going back to the 70s or 80s, but it goes further than the previously shown diagrams. And one of the first and biggest differences, from my opinion, is that we can show that here at the edges of the network, there we have the connection to the environment, to the customer, and we can also incorporate a loop. So we can show how we deliver something, and there's some sort of compensation, usually money. So this way of looking at an organization, on the one hand, allows us to see that here everything in this area all the edges of the network, they must be somehow operational units, because they do something, they deliver something to a customer or to the consumer, whatever. Then the next cool thing about the network view or idea is that here within this red area, you can show nodes who are inside of the network, and they usually have more kind of an enabling function, be it, for instance, something like infrastructure in the IT world or HR, stuff like that. So all the functions that do not generate value itself, but are necessary, that the ones who have to generate value don't have to do administrative work like, I don't know, they own HR or so. Yeah. Then, also cool, besides showing the operational and enabling level, you can now here, illustrated with the 3 nodes in the center, show something like a governance structure. So all the decisions that must be taken, that the whole stays together, that the long-term development, the strategic development of the company is done in the right way. And they have, so to speak, also usually from a legal point of view, the ultimate authority or responsibility for economic results and so on. So one could say, hey, the network structure, very cool. You have here some systems way of thinking. You have the non-linearity inside. You can better show how things are connected, and then also the respective processes in these connections actually work. All good. Also distinction between enabling and governance, very close to the ideas of the viable system model, but still too fuzzy for me. And that is my critique. There are more aspects necessary than just operation, enabling, and governance in order to maintain such a network, at least in a viable way, when you follow the theory of Stafford Beer. Yeah, so all these visualizations have their pros and cons and reasons why they exist. Now, at the end of this first video and the big why, I would like to dive a bit deeper into typical dilemmas or paradoxes or essential balances in organizations. And I'm referring here to a book written by Ivo Velečkov, which I highly recommend, and which this book explores in a very easy to understand way what are the essential balances and how are they connected to each other. What I would like to offer now is just a high-level view on them, because they are, from my perspective at least, very deeply woven into the VSM, and this is the first high-level approach that I would like to offer. Therefore, what is the first balance? The first balance describes actually a typical dilemma in organizations between autonomy and cohesion. Like I have said in the Spotify matrix example and also the network context, of course, on the one hand, you want to have operational units who are as independent as possible, that they can deliver the value. They know the customer the best, they know what matters, and they are also usually the guys who know their processes the best and how to fix problems or find also new opportunities, because they are closely connected to the environment. Nice. But imagine an organization where everybody would do what they want. Yeah, every team is on a granular level super free. Well, then there's the high chance that it would dissipate. And therefore, we need also organizational cohesion. We need something that glues the organization together, that keeps it together. And that is one of the fundamental insights, by the way, that is part of the VSM and the theory of viability. Then the second balance that is important to understand is, on the one hand, of course, you need a certain stability in a system. Like, for instance, how a team is not changed every day, because people need also on the social level some time to get used to each other and understand how they work the best way together. So a certain stability is super. But on the other hand, then there is the danger, a too stable team, well, they maybe get blind for new ideas or new opinions. And therefore also a certain diversity of perspectives, of opinions is necessary in order to be a team that is able to really understand in the best possible way what is happening actually around us and within us, and how can we cope with all the stuff that we have to do. So too stable, and it would die. If it's too diverse, and this is closely related also to the autonomy balance, well, then it cannot be kept together, and it would also dissipate. And then the last balance deals with the problem of, on the one hand, of course, you have to continuously exploit your existing delivery processes, and you want to have a high efficiency. And at the same time, of course, you have to invest time and money and brain power to find new opportunities by exploration, or in the agile world, I would call it a product discovery. And also this dilemma or balance is described within the VSM, and very important. Of course, you cannot solve this problem perfectly well, but in the first place, by just seeing it and also understanding which people and parts of the organization are here in this balance, that helps you to find the hopefully best trade-off, or at least a good trade-off, a trade-off that works and helps to achieve the results that are necessary on the short-term perspective, and of course in the long run. Okay, so let's summarize in a nutshell what are the benefits of the VSM and what to expect in the next video. Number one, for me super important, always the customer at first is part of the model. But not only the customer, but also the concept of a total environment. So you can also map aspects like your suppliers or your competitors, everything that is related to law and regulation, compliance issues, and so on. So you really can create a very complex model just regarding the environment to understand where are we embedded in and what are the different stakeholders that we have to take care of, maintain relationships, and so on. Then the second part, a bit abstract probably still, but very important for me to point out, is the fractal nature of the VSM. That means once you have understood all the different elements that are part of the VSM and how they interact and work together, then you can look actually at any part of the organization and find the proper patterns. So it does not matter once you know all these elements, if you're looking at a huge corporation or a department or a team, it does not matter. With the VSM, then you can apply always the same logic on the same organizational level or recursion. And then, last but not least, it's about the functioning of the whole. That means the VSM leaves the user a huge degree of freedom in how to apply it. Even though you have certain boundaries and certain concepts inside that tell you a little bit about the what are the elements of a viable system, it does not tell you how to maintain them and how to bring each of these elements to life in order to create something that is then more than the sum of its elements. So that's a very nice thing. It's only prescriptive in terms of the what is important, but it does not tell you how to do it. And you have a huge degree of freedom, like I said, how you then design such a system or try to analyze an organization with the VSM. Yeah, that's it for the first part. In the second video, then I will dive deeper with you into the model and all the details. See you there.